Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a special meeting of the Burrillville Town Council being held Wednesday, May 18th, 2016 at 7 p.m. in the Assembly Theater, 26 East Avenue, Harrisville. Present, all council members, with the exception of Michelle Bouchard, who has been excused. Others present, Dr. Robin Muskian, she's from Burrillville. Executive Director of Operations for the Providence School Department. Out front, we had a copy of the agenda. There were some questions that were asked 2 weeks ago at the meeting at the lodge that we've gotten some legal opinions on. We still have other ones we're waiting for. If you grab, if you haven't got the copy, it's out front. And also, Dr. Robin Muskian's bio is out there. Should be talking to us in the morning. Okay. Before we go too far, Captain, Assistant Chief.
Good evening. I'm just going to review the exit of the building. If we should be told to exit the building, or if the fire alarm should sound, there are 2 exits to your front. There's 3 exits in the rear. Most of us came in that main entrance. There's 2 alternates on the side. Again, if you're instructed to evacuate the building, we'll use those exits. Or if the fire alarm should sound, we will use those exits. Thank you.
Okay, before we go any farther, how many people have been in this building before? Yeah, excellent. As the Board of Administration, which I'm part of, is in the process of having new sound and video system installed in the building. We've gotten a very solid quote, but it should get done soon. The interesting thing, I'm telling this story, is in 1934, when Austin Levy designed this building, if you look up on the ceiling, there's some grates in the back there. I always thought that had something to do with the acoustics, so kicking the sound back to the stage or down to the crowd. But come to find out, Austin Levy had the foresight that someday we would need that space to put surround sound in this building. Really? So 80 years later, thanks to his foresight, we're going to be able to do it. I thought that was kind of cool, so I thought I'd share that. Okay, so the purpose of this session is an overview of the fundamentals of municipal tax agreements. Please note no specific discussion related to a proposed agreement between the county and Energy is planned. But what I will say is, let's see, 4 weeks ago we had a meeting at the police station. A lot of you were there. There were a lot of suggestions and requests made to the council concerning Energy and any agreement that might come up. As most of you know who were there, we went into executive session after that meeting. The council, as a whole, instructed attorneys to present Energy with, I think it was every request that was made. And as of now, we have heard nothing. So I have nothing to report on this. I know, there's a surprise. So with all that being said, I would like to invite Dr. Robin Muskian up to the podium. Robin has lived in town now for about 3 years. She's a member of the Board of Administration. She was part of the Charter Review Commission that the town just had, and she was elected chair by the other 8 members of that commission. I've known her for a couple of years now. I believe that this town was recommended to her by people from out of town, and she loves living here. So I asked her, because again, we're taking small bites of the apple because that's all we have right now, to discuss this, because the credentials are just perfect. If you read her bio, she's been heavily involved in the state for a long time. So that being said, I'd like to introduce Robin to you all and ask that, obviously you're all respectful of each other. Just please respect her. She's doing this as a favor to us all. So I think Robin will take some questions also. And when she's completed, we'll take whatever questions you have to, answer what we can, submit the questions to the clerk for the things we can't answer and find out answers for you. And hopefully, you know, hour and a half, we'll be ready to leave. It's our hope that come June 1st, the meeting we're going to have at the Spring Lake Beach, at the Champlain Hall, one of the experts will be available that night to discuss what he has discovered and answer any questions you may have. I'm not sure which one it is yet. It's either the air or the water one, I'm not sure. So, that being said, I'd like to introduce Rod Muskie. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Council, for asking me to come. Again, I speak only as a resident of the town. I have no vested interest other than that same interest that all of you have as a resident. And as I said to many of you who may have been at the last meeting, I own a farm right up the road on 96. I came here for the beauty of the town. I did talk to all sorts of outside people that I knew before I came here about this town, before I came, about the beauty and the pristine nature of it and the government of it and the history of it. So it's the best move I ever made, and I feel like I found a piece of heaven here. So I absolutely understand and have the same passion that you do. However, tonight what we're looking at is really a financial question. And as the council president said, I'm happy to answer questions, but I'm certainly not a finance expert. But just to reiterate from my biography, I've served as the Director of Administration for the City of Cranston and Director of Administrative Services for the town of South Kingstown. In South Kingstown, I had to deal with the question of wind energy. There was talk about putting offshore wind turbines off Block Island, and we were battling as to where those lines would come onshore. And there were some very pristine parts of South Kingstown that were potentially at risk. So I understand those battles, and I have literally, as I expressed at the last meeting, fought with the state on different issues, particularly even when I was in Cranston. We dealt with state property. As many of you know, we had the prisons and the institution and the whole Pastori complex. So I know what it's like to have the state come in and actually take my property and say, I'm giving you $10,000. I'm looking at them saying $10,000. This is like $1 million worth of access to you. So I've been in the battles. But what I can say to you is, and one of the questions that came up at the last meeting that I heard, and I chatted with a few people after, and I think this is sort of what generated the council president to reach out to me. There was a lot of discussion as to whether or not, why the council is even entertaining negotiating with the company. And I think one of the things that's important is, by law, we can't tell somebody, you know, we're not going to let you here, we're not going to tax you so you can't come. If the state dictates that these people can be here, they can be here. And that's a battle for the state. But we have a statute, and I think it was 44-330 that the clerk sent over to me, that specifically says that the town has every right to negotiate. What that means is that if we don't negotiate, they simply go on the tax roll. And if they go on the tax roll, basically all we can tax them for is the value of the land and basically the buildings and tangible property itself. You really can't... Turn it down?
Yeah, a little closer.
Oh, closer, okay. You really... I usually think I'm yelling at everybody, my big mouth. You really can't tax based on the fact that, okay, they're going to make a lot of money. It's not an income tax per se. Property taxes don't work that way, as you know. I can't say that if a Wendy's and a McDonald's comes in, I think Wendy's is going to make more money, so I'm going to charge them more per thousand. I don't have that authority. So when you're taxing, you can only tax based on very concrete standards that an assessor has, unless you enter into a specific treaty. The reality is, a lot of that land for taxable purposes, while we may think it's magnificent, isn't highly valuable for taxes. And the buildings themselves and the tangibles would have some value, but certainly not the value we can get from a treaty. So one of the most critical things we can do, if we're stuck with this, is ensure that we are getting as much financially as we possibly can. And again, because there may be issues, there may be infrastructure costs, we have roadways around there, there are going to be things that we need to think about, and we want the money for that, frankly. The other thing to consider with all of this is, again, we can't give them a different mill rate than anybody else gets. We can't say, if it's going to go on the regular tax roll, we're just going to charge it more. The treaty gives us the opportunity to set the money. Now, we can't go completely unreasonable either and say, and I heard there were rumors running around that people were saying, we'll just charge them, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars or $1 billion. The reality is, if we're unreasonable, we're going to end up in court, which I gather has happened in the past with Ocean State as well. They have a lot of lawyers, We certainly know they certainly have a lot of money. That's not an option either, to say, well, let's just charge them something absolutely outrageous. While on a gut level, I'd love to say, well, just charge them something ridiculous. That's not going to work either. We're going to end up in court. So what it needs to be is a fair amount that gets the town at least something in return for the concerns that we have. A treaty also allows you to go into these discussions that many of you who are immediately located around it, if your property is immediately around it, part of those discussions on buyouts and everything else can happen as a result of a treaty. You put them on the tax rolls, they're obligated to do absolutely nothing for us and for those people who live right there. And frankly, I mean, I'm worried about it, yes, for the whole town, but if I lived right there, yeah, that's a very valid concern. Another issue with the difference between a treaty and putting it onto the regular tax revenue as taxable property is the tax levy cap. So it's a little complicated, but many of you may know this. We have a 4% cap in the state on property tax revenue. That cap is not on your individual property. It's not that they can only raise your property 4%. A few years back, the state changed it to make it that all taxes collected, the total levy, could only go up 4%. In theory, that's nice, right? Because then if somebody comes in and pays taxes, a big amount of taxes on the levy, and the town needs to raise 4% of money for infrastructure costs or operating costs, then everybody shares the burden a little more equally, because you have maybe businesses come in and whatnot. It's a good economic development plan, sort of. The problem is that sometimes when something like that comes in, if they require services from the town that we wouldn't have otherwise had to have given, we can only raise our total levy 4%, and that counts against it. So you want this money separate so it doesn't get calculated. If the town ever had a crisis and had to raise its levy 4% to serve all of us, that 4% wouldn't be the same amount of money if you now, it'll be the same amount, but this company would be in there and we couldn't get the full amount that we need. It changes the way the revenue is calculated. I know it sounds crazy, but it does, and in many ways it disincentivizes you from having economic development come into your towns. Because economic development sometimes costs infrastructure money. Massive development hurts your levy ability. On the flip side, in all honesty, one of the things that I think we all need to look at talking to our state reps about is, you know, when we first started talking about this, I said, well, if it doesn't go against the levy, it probably won't hurt, it won't hurt us in state funding formula. And if it goes against the levy, it might. Unfortunately, statute 451314, I believe it is, 451314, actually says that Ocean State Power was grandfathered, but anything else that comes in, treaty or not, actually counts when the state does its funding formulas, which is sort of an unfortunate side of this. And that statute needs to be looked at, and your state reps, our state reps, need to be saying that's not fair. That's not fair, because if they're giving us money to offset the challenges we're going to possibly face as a result, it should not hurt our funding formula. So while we need the treaty, while I believe that we really need to do this separate from the tax roll and the revenue, we also need to consider talking to our state reps about that statute changing. It grandfathered Ocean State Power that we got to keep them without it hurting our funding formula, but it is not allowed that to happen for this. And I can understand if they don't want other things in the town to be exempt and not count. I can understand statewide so that other communities don't say, well, you're getting this big hunk of money and it's not counting against you. But I think that we certainly have a right, if we're going to get this, to be looking at our state reps and saying we want the same grandfather clause on this one. And that's sort of a side issue. But as we enter a treaty, it's something we need to think about. So, I mean, I'm only here to just express my opinion on this. I just know that it's very easy to say, to have the gut reaction or want to throw our hands up and not sit at the table with these people. And I've been there, as I said, I have fought with the state. In this case, it's not a fight with the state. In that sense, as far as the tax portion of it, the state gives us the authority to enter treaty. And entering treaty allows us a whole lot more money. At least we're going to get something and the ability to control something for those properties around. The things that we're talking about, cleaning wells and all that stuff, those right now are all sort of these verbal agreements that we have. And obviously the State Energy Board is going to, the siting board is hearing those as well. And that's going to be part of what they take into consideration. But I certainly would be a lot happier if all that was incorporated into a treaty as well, on a local level. And it's locally, you're representatives who are going to do what's in the best interest fiscally of this town as well. We can't control what the Energy Board will do, but the one thing we can control is how this gets taxed. And I think that that's something we at least need to consider and let the council do its job on that. And I believe it's the treaty is eventually voted in as ordinance or resolution. It's voted as an ordinance. So there certainly will be a public hearing on those numbers. So we will all know what those numbers are before there's any vote on it. And I think that that's critically important. I know there's a lot of question as to why it's behind closed doors and whatnot, and that's a negotiating thing, and I certainly know I would have had a hard time negotiating if I had to publicly state what my angle or position was going to be, whether it was a labor contract or this type of a treaty. You can't do that. But before any of it's voted on, just like any labor contract or anything else, the public absolutely will have a right to vet it and have their say at that point too. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for us to be able to have voice as public. And again, I speak to you as one of all of us, just asked to come here on behalf of the council. I love the town, it's the best thing I did, and I couldn't feel more welcome anywhere as a relative newcomer in a town where a lot of people have been their whole lives. So I'm actually really honored that you all would sit and listen to me talk this long. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. That was excellent. Mrs. Woods?
Yes,
I'll do my best on questions.
absolutely, and I appreciate it. Thank you. That was helpful. And it feels nice coming from one of our own. We do, board here or not. My question is, what is their incentive to come to the table with us? If they'd save so much money just going to the tax, are they forced to come to this?
Yes. That statute 44-330 it is, says, you know, that the state, notwithstanding any tax rules, has the right to negotiate an agreement. They can't not. The reality is, though, if we threw a ridiculous number out there, they could certainly then try to take us to court. And let's face it, they're going to have the money to take us to court and fight us.
Yeah, they're already showing their money.
And we saw that with Ocean State. You know, there were disagreements. We end up in court. Then it cost us even more money.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name's Ken Putnam Jr. I live right on the Walnut Road, just down below. I have several questions for you. They're going to put in such a plan up there that's going to ruin the atmosphere up there for all wildlife. And I don't understand where DEM is not jumping up and down, and the wildlife is not jumping up and down. We have species up there that we don't have anywhere else in this state or the states around us. Now, where are those people? Why aren't they jumping up and down?
And they're supposed to be at the table on the siting board. DEM has a seat at that table.
They should be there long before.
And we need to be there.
Yes, definitely. Now, my other big question is, with the town taxes, you have to realize that this plan is going to put all these pollutions in the air. All the other commercial buildings here in town don't do what they're going to do. So how can we not tax them more than what we're taxing?
You can't.
And sir, that's why we need to enter a treaty. Because if we don't do a treaty, they just get, by law, I can't say I like you less and I like you more, so I'm going to change tax rates. If we do the treaty, that's how we get more money. For exactly the potential of what you're talking about. That's exactly what I'm saying. If we tax them like on the normal tax roll, they're going to pay a lot less money because they're going to pay what any other business pays. That's the law. But with the law allowing us to enter a treaty, that law 44-330 that allows us to enter a treaty, then at least gives us the latitude to say, you know what, you're going to impose a burden on us. You present a potential burden, and we want money for that. We want to get paid for that burden. If you put that on the levy, even if it was the same amount, the problem we run into with the tax cap is you can only raise 4%. If they cost us a load of money for some reason, if we have some major cost that we can't put back on them if they're on the regular tax rolls because we don't have a treaty, and again, a treaty can incorporate who's going to incur the cost. If we do that and we have to raise 4% on the levy, we're not even going to be able to raise enough if by chance that year we were going to have to raise to offset the services we all need. Police and trash and all the wonderful things we get from this town. So, sir, I think you're right on the money, but you're illustrating the point that we need the treaty versus the tax rolls.
The other thing that I am upset about is they want to give them, what, 20 or 25 year tax rate. Why are they doing that? Why aren't we gonna, my taxes don't work that way. My taxes just went up on several properties.
So it can go up to so long, and then it can be renewed for up to so long, but again, that's where what comes down to, we have to look at is the amount, presumably, that we are gonna entrust the council to negotiate, and then we're gonna scrutinize when it comes in front of us. That amount should be significant enough that if we lock in, and they can be increases, I believe the Ocean State one had increases built into it. So after so many years, it increases so much. After another, because again, our services are going to go up. If there's some type of an issue, the cost of everything 10 years from now is going to be a lot higher. Those are all absolutely valid questions, and those are you're exactly hitting the point on why we need a treaty.
Everything's gonna go up when they come in, because the sewer plant, if they allow them to open that well up, which is supposed to be full forever, if they allow them to open that up, that sewer company cannot maintain all this extra wastewater that they want to do.
Capacity absolutely has to be considered. The chemical load that comes back after a plant uses the water has to be considered. Those are all considerations, and I do, as I said, I understand that. I had a sewer plant that I
Mr. Putnam, we'll have that conversation hopefully with the sewer department and our water experts in 2 weeks.
I got a question.
Yeah, shoot.
Okay.
Call the meeting.
So, John, you guys, you're for this plan?
Oh, I did not take a position on that at all.
How come? I said, how come you're not against it?
I didn't say I was for it or against it.
No, what
sir.
is your position?
We can talk, what if I know
No,
my...
you're one of us, right?
I'm one of you.
You're not in the council.
Right here, Robin loves her land and came up here for her land and her property and her wildlife.
Are you in the town council?
No.
No.
What's your position on it?
I'm not thrilled the plan's coming.
What's that?
I'm not thrilled the plan's coming. I'm not happy at all.
No, are you for it or against
I
it?
just said I'm not happy about it at all.
Okay.
That's an against, that would be against, I presume. I'm not thrilled, why?
So we have a Harvard-educated attorney that represents our town. He told us, that's funny?
No.
What?
He's not here tonight, so I really don't want to go into it since he's not here to defend what we're going to say, but go right ahead.
No, I didn't know if that was, I didn't mean to make a joke.
No, it's not
sorry.
a joke, it's not a joke.
If you guys think it's funny, I don't know.
It's not.
What's that?
We don't think it's funny. He's not here to defend himself.
That's all.
Defend himself? Why would he defend himself?
He's not going to answer whatever you're going to say about him.
No, I'm gonna say something nice about him. I don't think he's gonna mind if I compliment him. Would you mind? He said to us that it's incumbent to not enter a tax agreement. Now, this is, Cale Keeble had said this, do not have the council enter a tax agreement. I wonder if he's wrong on that.
I respectfully disagree with that position. And again, I'm just being honest with you, I was asked to be honest tonight and be here as a representative of this town and a representative of us, meaning the townspeople, and I do not agree. I absolutely, from my own personal experience in my work life, in 2 different communities where I work, I absolutely do not agree.
Okay, next thing, tax on this, like Mr. Putnam had said, this is gonna tax the usage of the sewer. So we attended a sewer meeting, and they said, well, we can handle this plan. But because certainly our town council does not want to have economic development being, let's take 2nd or 3rd or 4th or 5th power plants in town, we want manufacturers, we want retail, we want services, like other normal towns would do. We don't want to have economic development by attracting a 3rd or 4th power plant. That's going to put a real swelch on bringing other business in. Because what Mr. Ken Putnam said is right on the money. We get that from Bill Andrews saying that this is going to take us, we can handle this, but who knows if we can handle anything else. I'm sure you guys know
I think you said you
that.
had a meeting on that in a couple of weeks.
And then the other thing was, I presume the job site you're looking at, town council, is a 6.6-mile job site.
What are we talking about?
I'm talking about Invenergy.
All right, we're not Invenergy, you know we're not building a power plant, right?
Of course, why would you say that?
The thing that we're looking at, we're not looking at it. Just, I want to clarify, we're not putting a power plant here.
You clarified it, I heard you.
Okay, but
This is a 6.6-mile job site. That's how I'm looking at it. You are too, Jerry, tonight? Yeah. What is the job? Are you aware of what the job site is, John?
6.6 mile and mile. I don't understand that.
Because there were other things that's going to be affected. The sewer lines, power lines, and so forth. So they're working where they would not normally work. I don't know if, have you,
What do you mean by 6.6 miles up a range?
what's the definition of the job site? Has that been defined yet?
Where did you get the 6.6 miles from?
From Invenergy and all the discussions that they've been telling?
Including the water connections and everything?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Well, let me find out for you, Paul.
Yeah, because that-
I'm not sure, to be honest with you, I don't know that.
We'll get back to you.
Okay. Okay, so Cale Keeble, you think, have you spoke to Cale Keeble?
Oh,
So Cale Keeble had said to us that you gotta stop the town from entering it. Now, of course, you can have don't enter a treaty, you can make it difficult for them to pay more. I respectfully disagree with you.
look, I don't understand what you're saying. I can't make it, you can't make it
I'm trying to say
difficult.
as clear as I can. In other words, a town council cannot enter a special tax treaty. There's nothing in...
Yes, absolutely. Statute 45-330 gives us that authority as a community to be protected.
Or you can enter a tax treaty and make the taxes
That's
higher.
what I'm talking about, the
Yes.
tax treaty.
But you went from enter a treaty or be absurdly high. There's a way to enter a treaty and be high. It's not either or, like no treaty, a treaty, or...
I'm sorry if that's what you understood, sir.
Well,
I'm
that's
sorry.
what you said. That's what you said.
I must have misexplained it that time. Sir?
Very great. You made the point already, but it seems to me, and I would... So you make great means for us. I would avoid it. Two things are occurring. One is that there be some form of take care of like an counter decision so that's in place. But I think it's critical for them to know that people. The second thing that strikes me is that
Can't hear you.
a lot of the, I'm dealing with the kid, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, wait a minute.
Mr. Craig, wait just a second, John's going to bring you a microphone.
Yeah. I go down here with
What would, I think, be very helpful to a lot of us is if we could see examples of what these tax treaties look like. Now, I know Invenergy has entered into tax treaties with other municipalities. Those have to be public documents. It should, in fact, I would expect that if we are being advised by counsel in the negotiation of the treaty, that he would have already collected at least some of those. And if the council could make those available so that people can see what these things look like, that might very well alleviate a lot of the concerns, particularly the better negotiated ones that are indexed, ones that take into consideration the possibility that there will need to be an acceleration in the level of services and so on.
Absolutely, again, I concur that they're public, and I know from my own standpoint in a position where I have negotiated, whether it's a labor contract or a treaty, I always like to see what's out there. But your point on indexing is exactly right, and this is exactly what we go back to where we put them on a tax roll versus a treaty. If, for example, our town's done great, they make every effort not to raise our taxes too much. If they can never get raised more than we can if they're on a tax roll with us. So if we have a great few years in the town and they don't raise taxes, we don't get any more money from that company. However, again, with a treaty, you can build those indexes into it. Those indices can be built right into it. So yes, you can get more money even, whereas if they're under the tax roll, the only way to get more money out of them is to raise all our taxes. And the town hopefully won't want to do that to us.
And right now, if you want to see a good local example anyway, the Ocean State Power Pilot Agreement's available, and the new tax agreement that the town entered into with them last year is available also. That's a pretty good template anyway.
That's a good idea. I'll poke around myself.
Yeah,
Find states.
and I'm sure, I say this, I'm sure our attorneys have done exactly what was suggested here, but I will have them put together some of the more comparable, say, tax agreements and events you may have done throughout the country and see if we can get that available for the future. Yeah, I think you're right, sir.
Jeremy Bailey, I still live in town. But I'm going to respectfully disagree with this gentleman here that wants to see what other tax agreements, what they look like. I actually have very high hopes for our town council and the solicitors and the attorneys that are negotiating this. And I could care less what the previous tax agreements look like. For one reason and one reason only. Well, many reasons, but I'm going to make one big one. Invenergy has said they have never paid out in a butter for their property. Never.
Hold that thought. We'll see about that.
That's right. That's right. They said they have never. So I don't care what the past agreements look like. We're going to create a new agreement. I used to work for the government. You know, we used to negotiate contracts, and I used to be told, no, we've never done that before. That's not what's been done. I don't give a crap what's been done in the past. I said, this is what we're going to do now. And if we always go by the past, the future can never be formed. It's always going to repeat itself. Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. Hi, thank you for coming. Actually, I am a butter. I live directly across the street from Algonquin, so I do have a vested interest. I agree with Jeremy. That is what Algonquin, that is what Invenergy says, is that they don't buy people out. However, I have been afforded the opportunity to be an intervener, so I do have a say at the table. And I hope that whatever I say at the table will benefit everybody in my neighborhood. But I have a question for you regarding the funding formula and the grandfather clause that you mentioned. Could you go into that a little bit more? Are you talking about state funding aid that we receive?
Right.
And then asking the legislature to grandfather Invenergy into?
So this is something I'm poking around getting ready for tonight that I stumbled on that I didn't expect to stumble on. Typically, we don't get state aid on the municipal side very much anymore. It's school aid that comes down. And so I started asking around, and we've talked about this loosely, does that aid somehow, is the wealth of your town is what's calculated into sort of, I say the wealth, or the money, the revenue of your town, is sort of how they consider, they look at poverty, there's a whole host of ways that the state aid, the state funding formula works. Well, apparently it's extremely complicated because it took about 6 or 7 people that I spoke with at the state to finally get me the answer on this, and then somebody found a statute. Apparently, there's this 451314, I believe it is, states that except for Ocean State Energy, any money that's brought in under treaties or agreements outside of the regular levy does count now against that state funding formula. So whether we do it on the tax roll or the levy, it doesn't make a difference from the funding formula standpoint. But what I'm saying that we all need to look at is for this particular, and I understand statewide why they didn't want that, because then anybody would go with pilot agreements for any big company or anything else that comes in. And that really would defeat the purpose of looking at towns based on their economic development. But in this particular case, given the sensitive nature of this and given the concerns that we as a town have over what it might do, so while on the surface that number might make our town look wealthier, it could actually be doing sort of the opposite. I think it's really important that we talk to our state legislators about either modifying that statute, revoking that statute. I don't think they'll revoke it totally, but I certainly would like to see us have this as another sort of grandfather in, or a way of making this exempt from counting on that. This isn't traditional economic development by any stretch of the imagination. If it was traditional economic development, I'd say, well, no, it is making us wealthier as a community. This is not traditional economic development.
Well, I have two thoughts with that, whether or not we could get the legislature to do that, and whether or not it would apply, because it could be considered retrospectively, where not prospectively. So the fact that they've already had already has their application submitted may actually work against us. So with that being said, with that being said, I'm not a lawyer and I don't know that.
And I'm not either. So.
With that being said, what I'd really encourage and ask the town council to do is to take this into consideration. And if there is a treaty, you need to build in the fact that our state aid may be diminished or our school aid would be diminished, and they need to pay for it. So all of these ramifications need to be considered if there is a tax treaty. That if we're going to be losing state aid, and there's some smart people who do numbers out there who can project what it would be,
they need to pay for that, and that's my question, and that's my request to the town
It's
council.
probably not huge money, but it doesn't matter, it's money.
It
And
shouldn't
it
be our
needs to
money.
be, and it needs to
shouldn't
be
our money.
considered.
We already gave enough. It shouldn't, I
Absolutely.
agree with you. It shouldn't be our money. And I understand the reasons why we may want to enter into a tax treaty. And I understand 25 years is very scary, but if they're on the tax roll and they decide in 10 years they've made enough money, they can just pack up and leave, folks, just like you put the kids in your house. So one of the reasons that I think it may be considered a good idea is to hold them accountable. And if you want to hold them accountable, then we need to take into consideration that school aid and every other aid and services that we may lose as a result of that being here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sherman.
John, can I ask you something?
Yeah, sure.
I really don't think the state...
Speak up, though, Steve.
For schools, state aid for schools would be affected if the state decided to change the law to grandfather in energy as they did with Ocean State Power to affect the levy. If they change that, it would be grandfather. The state would make their rules as they go.
Right, we still don't know what our state aid is yet. Now, we got a budget meeting.
Burrillville's got the highest school aid among small communities in the state. We're nearly 50%.
And we don't want to lose that.
No, we don't.
I don't think, now, what I've been told, Robin did some research, but what I've been told on our side, and we haven't talked about this at all, so I don't know. But even if we go with the tax treaty, a portion of that may go towards the levy, but not the entire amount.
All I'm asking is, there's a lot of beliefs and there's a lot of thinking. I'd really like to have the knowledge behind it. I think we need to know. I know we all believe things and we all think things, but we really need to know.
I agree.
And that's my only point.
It's absurd it's taking this long. It's absurd it's taking this long.
That's right, Paul, but like I said, we're in the first 100 yards of a 1-mile race. That's the truth. We still have time to go. We still, this pickup speed next month, and then June, July, naturally summer, when nobody's going to be paying attention, is when this will really be full blown.
If I can, John, I'd like to add this.
And we'll continue having these meetings. I won't stop. Once the experts are available, we'll do it. I'll keep doing it.
John, may I add something? Property values as related to power plants is a whole different animal than having property values on any other commercial building. They use different formulas, it's complicated, and it changes yearly, which means we have to have that appraised yearly. Every year we do that, we could be up for a challenge, as we were at Ocean State Power. They challenge every one of our property assessments when they force us to pay on taxes.
Correct.
That's the value of the tax treaty, because you lock in an amount for a 20-year period.
And the shame of that really was with Ocean State Power is we get their pilot money and we'd have to put half of it aside in case we lost. Because there's a 12% penalty if we lose. So we had to keep putting this money aside. For 7 years we did that until we finally got them to reach an agreement with the town and we were able to get all that money back. But it is complicated. Steve's right. I can't wrap my head around it. That's why I asked Malcolm to come. So hopefully, educate us a little bit more on what it entails and the ramifications.
Bob Woods, I live up in the woods off of Jackson Schoolhouse Road. Hi neighbors. John's right, this is the first 100 yards in a mile-long race. And so, I want to look at this from a little different perspective, and obviously you have a perspective, and you're coming here tonight, and Town Council has a perspective, Invenergy has a perspective, PUC has a perspective, the Sewer Commission has a perspective, and we have a perspective as well. I think the word treaty, and I don't think any of us have to look up the definition of what a treaty is, but to me, what is a treaty? Basically we're at odds with something. We've got to come together and have some kind of a mutual agreement so we don't have to battle anymore. Well, let me just say this, the battle is just beginning.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't want to have a treaty now, okay, because we haven't lost this thing. And it's not about money, and it's not about buying out property, because quite frankly, I love where I live, and I cannot think of anywhere else where I could move that I would be as satisfied as where I am right now. And I think that goes for a lot of us, the Putnam family, the Bailey family, and everybody's around here. We don't want to move. We don't want to be bought out. This is not about money for us.
We're gonna lose.
And I think talking about the tax street at a 100-yard dash when we have a mile to go is really premature.
Exactly, exactly.
What we should be talking about is that contaminated well that's down there, that when Ocean State Power was thinking of using contaminated wells over in Lincoln instead of the Blackstone River, DEM or decided with the environmental impact statement, which we don't have for this power plant, they denied using that site because of contaminated wells. But yet there's one contaminated over here and it's going to be okay for Burrillville.
We're suckers.
You know, when Ocean State Power went in, there was actually 88 sites that were suggested for Ocean State Power from a variety of sources. And it boiled down to 4 different sites. In Buck Hill, where this one is proposed, was discounted. And there was a variety of reasons for that. And you know most of the reasons why that it was discounted? Is that the animals couldn't be here today. Because of the wildlife couldn't be here today. The vegetation couldn't be here. The swamps couldn't be here. The air couldn't be here today. And so when we're talking about our families, we're talking about our land, we're talking about the environment, why we live there, and you know, somebody's handing me the agenda. Something on here that says the power to fight it, you know, what power do we have to stop Invenergy? Listen, this is not about power to stop Invenergy. They want to go build a power plant, We have the power to stop them up there. And for some reason, we seem like we just want to mitigate everything. You know, we just want to say, okay, they're going to do it. You know what? My wife says, you going to the meeting tonight? I says, yeah. She said, we should stop doing this. I'll get right here. Because this is stressful on all of us. You know, and we're all trying to research. You know, there's attorneys sitting in this audience right now. There's engineers sitting in this audience right now. You know, we're not just a bunch of hicks out in the woods. We're getting very educated. And you know, the town council, I actually commend you guys, because this has got to weigh on you very heavy as well. And you know, we look to you, and so you have these workshops, and sometimes I think, you know, we come here and we just talk about mitigating, you know, and truthfully, I want us to come together with you and say, listen, how can we stop this thing from going to Buck Hill? You know, if there were 88 sites suggested for Ocean State Power, why are we looking at those sites instead of the natural resources that are up there? You know, some of the reports we had from DEM saying, that's a jewel, not in Burrillville, that's a jewel in the state of Rhode Island up there. You know, there's actually, I'm going to say endangered species, I don't know if that's quite true or not.
It is.
Okay, so why are we looking there? And I think we should be doing, and so when we're looking at this tax treaty, we should look at it, I think, in a little different light. And if there's something that we can twist an arm, let's twist an arm. You know, and I just want to reiterate. Pasco Utility District signed an intent agreement to use that well. That was closed by a court order. Nobody talks about the court order and how that well all of a sudden become used. Did somebody go to the court and got a release for that? Do you know that if that happens?
You don't control Pasco Utility District.
No, you don't. You know what? Neither do I, but I have that question. I would think you would have that question.
Well, we do. Yeah, we'll have Pasco Utility District, the one who's working.
Well, it should have been asked a long time ago. You know, how can they use the water when that was...
Yeah, why would Mike Kirkwood sign that?
Okay. So these kinds of things that need to be investigated. And Invenergy has been going since 1914 in this town, talking to different people and getting certain approvals. And it seems to me that they're looking for a license from DEM before they have an environmental impact statement. That's putting the cart before the horse. You know, we're talking about a tax street, we should be talking about an environmental impact statement, so we're all on the same playing field.
Yes. If I could Can I just respond quickly? Yeah, if I could just respond quickly. I absolutely don't disagree with the word you said. The thing is that's a fight that that we need to take elsewhere. The DEM question is a perfectly valid question if there haven't been impact statements. I mean, I know any of us who are going to do anything near the water or anything else have to go through all sorts of hoops with DEM before we so much as, put a stake in the ground. But again, I think the reason, and I look at it from the perspective of, as I said, a resident, as that moves forward or not, if we can fight it and stop it, that's great. Starting to have the discussion on the financial end, it's not saying, and I would never sit here and say that buying me out would be acceptable and it's just about the money, because I can tell you that my particular property, and I know what I paid for my property, if that plant was next to me, and this is why I fully understand the situation the abutters are in, if that plant was next to me and I couldn't maintain my farm for whatever reason, even if they bought it out at full value of what I could sell it for here, our property values are actually relatively affordable in this town. I cannot go to another town and replace it. I looked long and hard. I loved it up here, but I also could afford it up here. So I'm not even remotely suggesting that this is, okay, well, let them just buy us out, we're going to be happy and money will make this better. And I just want to clarify, I'm not remotely suggesting that. What I am saying is that we have a huge uphill battle at the state level to stop this. Realistically, we're in a very, very bad spot to stop this. In the meantime, at least we need to look at it, and I think this gentleman mentioned it, if there are issues, if there are problems, we need to have the financial resources to deal with that and not against our revenue cap.
My name is Mary Bailey. I live on East Long Lake Road. Listening to what Mr. Woods was saying, as if I understand government the way it works, the federal government can supersede state government. Is that correct? Would you say that's correct? And we're talking about the possibility of endangered species. I know that it's been mentioned that there are eagles in the area, and I'm wondering if there's an eagle's nest anywhere on this property, can that be disturbed? Or if these are endangered species and they are claimed endangered by the federal government, then can the state, I'm assuming then the state can't come in and say, oh, you have to take this. If the federal government says, oh, no, you can't. Would you say that's true, or should we have the town solicitor give us an opinion on that? Right, but what I'm saying is, am I the only one who's thinking this way? Is that sound reasonable?
Yeah, good one. That's a good one.
My question would be, council, could we investigate what it takes to get the federal EPA involved without using this site?
We are.
It's say we can use a bathroom where
We are.
we can certainly stop a power.
We are in the process. That's one of those answers that we'll have.
Could you
I think to say tomorrow, but,
Yeah, I understand. They've got in the way a much bigger project
Well,
than this. They're not influenced the way people in a small state are.
For those of you that were at the meeting we had at the lodge, Mr. Roselli from the Burrillville Land Trust made a very generous offer of the Land Trust to do some of those environmental, answer some of those questions with their own experts and professionals. I met with Mr. Roselli yesterday, and I believe that we're going to be, the Burrillville Land Trust will answer a lot of those questions. We should have some solid intel as far as that's concerned. That's what their focus is, actually.
As an abutter, I received a notice from FERC regarding the expansion of Algonquin. Why can't we capitalize on that expansion from Algonquin in the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and ask them to expand the Algonquin environmental impact statement that they just had done last year?
Okay, Louise, to get that.
That's what I'm trying to work with FERC.
No?
That's perfect.
Louise, have a question.
We need to consider, because the notice is posted on town's website. If there's no hearings from FERC here in Burrillville, they're mostly in Massachusetts. Why? It appears it's only because of the receptors that they want to replace up there. But we've already started to see the construction workers are coming. They're only in the pre-approval stage. That expansion second phase has not been approved yet. We need to see, it's all one piece of property. As much as Invenergy wants to say that, And I think maybe that's where that 6 mile issue comes up. If I can understand Jeremy speaking, I think because they want to segment it and say, we're going to build it here, and then the power's going to come from down the road a little bit. Once they connect to that pipeline, that's a federal project, and FERC is going to be involved. If that's the case, and we already have these environmental impact statements where it wasn't allowed to be there when it was open state, we need to force this issue with FERC and have them come in and do a environmental impact statement. Because if you look at Algonquin's environmental impact statement, they already talk about their emissions, they talk about all the poisons that we're talking about with energy, and they talk about how they're above their 56 decimal.
It's loud now. It's loud now.
It's getting louder because the demand is getting warmer, the weather is getting warmer.
Crazy.
It's loud again. We go through cycles. I know Mr. Russell has been outside my home listening to, neighbors have called and said, you know why Steve Russell's sitting outside your house? And my answer is, I absolutely do, because I've invited him. So I know people come and listen, and I know you know how noisy it is, but why don't we look at the FERC that we already have with the property that's already there and see if we can get them to make some movement on it.
Did they get that, Louise?
Quick question.
Sure.
What's all the construction done for all the sewer departments?
It's a $6 million upgrade, actually. It is a big upgrade. It has nothing to do with the plant. They, no, it doesn't. No, I know, 3 years ago, I was there with Paul Louise when this came up, but I disagree more, but I know for a fact, the sewer department, has nothing to do with that. It has something to do with D&M regulations.
John, what about the car counters that are all over?
Say that again, I'm sorry? What was that?
They're counting the cars now, the state's counting the cars at different streets in town. What's going on? Why is that all of a sudden here?
I think they use that for what roads are gonna get repaved first, or bridges have to get fixed first. They do that on, where my office is, they do that on my road, because there's a lot of commercial traffic and no residential traffic.
That was in one of the answers that Energy had for the question from the town.
Yeah.
And they're counting the cars for the traffic to see whether or not they're going to increase it, or their construction will increase traffic. Well, you know what, I'm not an engineer, but no, it's in one of the answers.
Yeah, I know.
Look at their.
Yeah, they need to.
I had to ask a question.
Sidewalks down past them, I'm just curious.
Well, that's been going on for 5 or 6 years now. They're finally getting to that point where the tax is gonna get paid.
When I was bringing her, they were doing Rock Hill, that's where I live.
Yep.
And had been done for 30 years, and I know the damage that was done to 100
Yes.
from all those trucks coming up and down and up and down. And that was damage that was done to that road just simply from hauling all of that car.
We need an expert. We need an expert. You're not an expert.
And that is exactly, but that's exactly why the question of treaty, I mean, the state roads we can't control, but we're gonna be on the hook for town roads that get beat on. This is exactly the type of infrastructure cost we need to be ready to offset if this happens. Well, that probably, yeah, actually, I don't, yeah, and now we're gonna have, yeah, so there's a cost us out of the back end as taxpayers too.
Maybe they're going to put some tolls on it.
That's the money.
I'd like to talk about the play tree. As far as, first of all, I live 3 miles away, so I don't have a shot when it comes to getting into the pail. I'll reload the poison, of course, but I don't have any of that. That being said, I think a lot of the frustrations, I'm just speaking for myself, the vibe I get, these workshops are great, but each one, the clock is ticking, and each one we get to, we're like, I don't know, we'll find that out. I don't know, we'll find that out. We need our answers, because we have to move on it. And yes, we're in the first 100 yards or whatever, but think about how quickly summer goes by.
think about all of a sudden it's Christmas. This is how fast this is gonna go by, and we don't have our answers yet. We need our answers to fight. We're fighting for our survival here.
Like I said to somebody earlier, when they come in to have that conversation, I want them to have the answers. I don't want people leaving frustrated because they had 7% of the answers. I agree. So that's the goal. I want to get with all the findings that they need to do and explain it, and then when you ask questions of them, they can answer them, and if there's something that comes up from that night, then obviously we'll have to look into it. But I agree, we are running out of time, it goes fast, and I know.
I've been in now for over a year, but I don't want to.
I know that.
And one of the meetings I asked that you invite Senator Whitehouse. Did you send that letter?
Yes.
And his reply was it?
I haven't heard back from you. Well, hey, not for nothing too, I noticed that Gail and Paul will be a meeting with the governor Thursday. Okay, and they asked that if you had any requests, questions, concerns, send them an email, a note on Facebook, whatever it is. I send a note asking them to, ask the governor to hold true to our promise to come up to town and talk to us. I offered, for the council to host it. I assured them that we would keep it as civil as we possibly can, because we're not that kind of town. And so I would recommend that when you get home tonight, go to Kale's email, go to his Facebook, ask him the same questions, just so that the governor sees it. And on that level, the governor sees 6, 7 emails from people in town, that's huge for them. So I'd love to have her on. Yeah, I have to. Oh, she did. She did commit to coming up, so we should hold it to her. Yeah, right. Okay.
Can I ask you a question if you're against the power plant? What can we do to try to stop it? We don't want to talk about the tax. Okay, I know that's not on the agenda. I know, so I'm happy to answer what I think, but I don't want to break any open meetings.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just have to,
You're with us, right?
Yeah, but the
I'm breaking open meetings here. I'm not breaking anything.
But look, I'm just sensitive to it. I've lived in that world. I'm careful about an agenda is an agenda.
Don't
So anyway,
don't worry.
well, that's okay. So her question, yeah, so my feeling is this, in battles that I've had with the state where they've wanted to do things on properties in a municipality that I had no control over from a municipal standpoint, is exactly what Council President Pacheco was saying. We have to rely on our state legislators to take this battle up for us. We're a small town. That's a challenge for us. We don't hold up down, and be really honest and objective with you guys. As a person in the town, rolling my eyes and grumbling, we're in a small town. How much power we have is, we have to be realistic. We need our state legislators. I've noticed there are a lot of signs down in Gloucester. It seems like they support on the west side of the state. It needs to be more than just Burrillville. We need to have collectively people go to the siting meetings. You bring up an absolutely valid point about DEM. You bring up, Mary, I believe it was Mary? What was your last name, ma'am?
Bailey.
Ms. Bailey, I believe Ms. Bailey brings up a really good point about the federal government. I can remember back years and years when I was a kid, they couldn't do anything on, they closed Moonstone Beach. That was the reason to close it, was there were pipe and clovers that had to be protected. So, we haven't been beyond protecting things in this state.
Are you contacting anyone to help us in this fight?
So I've actually, through my research on this end to find out what we can do in preparation for this meeting, I've contacted. I haven't gone the route yet of the environmental end. But I think what we have to do is really start looking at the DEM question, the environmental question, and I think that those are probably the most valid points that we're going to have. The reality is there's going to be a battle. There are people who want the plant in this state, not just the energy company.
Who will you be contacting to find out some more information?
So my feeling is that as a town collectively, we need to send messages to the head of DEM. And I'm certainly going to send emails on a personal level, as a townsperson. I don't have any club other than as a member of the town to say, hey, what are the impacts of this? Yeah, but I think collectively as a town, it's the siting board that holds the power.
Well,
right now,
it's the same way.
Jenny,
chairman is on.
She's on the siting board, but she's one of 3 people. The brand new head of statewide planning who's just come in from out of state, it's a new hire.
From Bridgeport, yeah.
From Bridgeport, Connecticut.
John, he is perfect in Bridgeport, by the way.
Oh, no, they're building another plant there.
That is the other person that's on the siting board as well. So statewide planning and DEM are really the primary people who are going to have the power to fight this if they choose to. So that's really where our energy needs to lie as a town to stop this. Again, tonight's issue is a very different issue. This is the, okay, if we end up with it, what do we do? But the reality is, fighting it is a challenge. And as I said, I mean, I battled with the state over one strip of land and one lane on one road. And it was just an impossible fight. But what we do have here that helps is the environmental question. And we are an environmental state. I mean, I think we can look at, have we contacted, as residents, have we contacted the Audubon Society, for example? You brought up birds. Have we contacted the Audubon Society? This isn't just the council. This is really, what do we as a community do? And those are the groups we need to look at. And I know just from listening to people that were resisting wind energy when I sat on some of the concerns about wind turbines and whatnot, it was the Audubon Society. In the end, they actually, I think, said it was okay. But the Audubon Society, you need to get DEM. We don't have a Save the Bay issue here, so we don't have the power. One thing we don't have, unfortunately, is the power of something like the Save the Bay organization that a lot of times the coastal communities have. So I think that those are the things we have to do. And I have to tell you, we really have to talk to our state reps very, very strongly about this. The legislator in this state holds a lot of the power. The governor makes a statement. If the legislator's on board with her, we're done. So the real power comes from having our legislators stand behind us on the plan.
Well, I think that's why they're meeting on Thursday.
Yes.
To voice their opposition.
Yes.
And convey everybody's, feelings about power.
And that's why emailing them and letting them know what your concerns are. And again, I'm going to say this with all due respect to everybody. I've been on the other end of the constituencies where I was the municipality. I was the person getting yelled at, depending on what it was, because everything I did wasn't necessarily always in favor of what the people thought was always best. There were always people for and against everything. What I can tell you is that when you email and when you send your messages, and this is a wonderful community. Everybody genuinely cares, and the vast majority of messages I hear, even just sitting here as a townsperson, I'm really proud that most of these things have been very reasonable and very logical, honest, fair questions. And I think that if you do that, you gain so much more leverage with your legislators. We cannot look like we're just rabid and don't care and say, no, we don't want this. Because I can tell you that knee-jerk reaction creates a very subconscious resistance from anybody who we're talking to, whether it's our reps or anybody else. But when if I was sitting here working for the town and I was listening to some of these things, I heard some really very rational concerns. And those and things that I hadn't thought of and things that I think collectively all of us together if we said, so that when they do meet with the governor, they have very fair, reasonable things to say. Look, somebody in my town asked this question and I need to be able to answer this. And they're reasonable things. Then we don't get dismissed. Because what I don't want to have happen is us to look like, we're just blind and we're saying, we don't want this because we don't want it. We don't want economic development, not in my backyard. This is not a NIMBY, not my backyard issue. This has a lot broader of a spectrum. And I've listened to fights over the NIMBY, who doesn't want to drive through on Reservoir Avenue or whatever it might be. Sometimes it's important to the one person there, but it's not necessarily in the best interest of a whole community. In this case, we're looking at something that a whole community has clearly shown it's very concerned about, not just the immediate neighbors. And that's why I think, even from my standpoint, it does matter to all of us. And those very reasonable things have to go to all of our legislators. I'm going to get on tonight.
Rob, have you been to some of these Invenergy meetings? You've been to the meetings?
I've not been to the Invenergy meetings.
How come?
I'm just really coming new to this as far as becoming aware of what's happening. Again, I don't work for the town.
No,
I'm a resident who has a very busy life like all of you guys. Yeah, I mean, so I started to become more aware of it as it bubbled up to the surface like everybody else, as I start seeing signs, as I start seeing protests. Like I said, I run my personal farm. I go to work every day like you guys. And what happens is we all slowly become aware of these things in our communities. We start hearing buzzes. We start watching the news. The first I even knew about it was when I started the paper. The governor came out and said, hey, guess what? Burrillville's getting a ballot plan. I said, we are.
John, so Cale says stop the sewer, stop the water, stop the tax treatment. So when I speak to him tomorrow, I'm gonna say, quit lying to me. Is that what I should be saying to him?
Without getting on your side, Paul.
Yeah, don't, I didn't say that.
Maybe I'm
That's funny, just like
I'm
you.
being funny when I say that.
Yeah, but they're trying
He
to
said,
set me up.
stop the sewer, stop the water,
He's fighting for us right now.
And
Let's
stop.
not talk about chaos and chaos not here.
No.
Right,
So
right.
I would feel.
Kathy, please, stop.
He'll defend himself.
I'm not attacking him. What is-
Yeah, you are.
I am not, keep your mouth shut.
Don't tell me.
All right, easy. All right, easy.
Taylor
Don't tell me
says,
to
stop.
keep my mouth
All
shut.
right,
Please be
easy.
quiet.
Easy.
You be quiet.
Holy shit, stop.
Easy,
Taylor says, stop the tax treaty, stop the water, and stop the sewer. I thought he gave us good advice. Do you disagree with that, John?
John,
I'm asking you a question.
listen, if this power plant was an industrial park, we wouldn't be sitting here tonight talking. And so when you talk about, if this is an environmental issue, I think every single one of us in here will agree to that. And we can all say, not my backyard, and we all will. And if you live next to the industrial park, he's doing the same thing. But the truth is, it is an environmental issue. And, I know the town spent, I don't know, $100 on these guys, expert guys. And I don't know really where they are, but, I really think if they were here, they could answer a lot of these environmental questions. Because if you look at everybody in here, I'll bet you 99.9% of us has looked under something on the internet about under the environmental thing. And so with our own limited knowledge, we're interpreting a lot of this stuff and maybe misinterpreting. So, when we have experts that we can talk to, that we at least feel that we can trust in what they tell us, we can come together as some kind of unity and have a force forward on this thing.
And I'll tell you the difference, and you hit a great point, the difference with the industrial park and why the frustration, for me, the NIMBY question on the industrial park is a little, a constituent buys a piece of property next to something that's zoned for potential C3, whatever it is in this town, I don't know if it's commercial 3.
Move to it.
Right, you move to it knowing it. Or somebody on a zoning board, or someone approaches a zoning board for a zone change. Again, that's happening at a very local level. So if you are a neighbor to a property and somebody's trying to get a zone change, you can fight at the zone level. You can fight at the council level. And you have the power to try to fight it here. The difference is the state law allows the Energy Siting Board to trump all of those rules. And that's where we as a town...
I can interrupt you for a second.
Yep.
I mean, I could have the act here and, this is like maybe 5 times reading it and I'm just starting to understand some of the words. But truthfully, they're held to a higher standard as well. Okay, this is not an arbitrary decision for them. Okay, they don't sit there and say, well, you know what, it's all about dollars and let's just get it done with and let's just let it happen. Okay, that's not true. Okay, they have certain criteria to make the decisions. They don't make the decisions on the spot. And the natural resources has to do it. One of the criteria, okay, one of the criteria of granting this thing is that they use a high quality water supply. Not just water, not just quality water, but a high quality water supply. Okay, so they have to look at that and say, listen, that cannot be overlooked.
Right.
And if you look down all through that criteria for them to make a positive decision on this, there's only one of them that they meet, natural gas fired. And so, the problem is that we don't have a level of trust with that because the governor came out way before we even heard it and says, this is great for Rhode Island, and basically it's going to happen. And everywhere we go, it seems like there's a dead end or someone's fighting against what we're reading and what we're finding out.
And that's exactly the type of thing that I think at the siting board, that those are the things that have to be asked. Those are exactly the questions that have to be asked. What does it mean to have a high quality water? Those are the questions we have to ask.
I know it's frustrating, but we'll have that conversation, hopefully within the next 4 weeks. We'll have that conversation. With the experts and with the questions. Sure.
Why, can the town council request that they get involved in this?
Well,
Can you do that?
Yeah, I'll have to find. we're gonna ask that question.
I spoke with FERC and they do not want to get involved right now.
But you know what, if you speak to FERC, if they don't want to get involved with the energy, we have to make a connection to Algonquin. They are involved with Algonquin. You know, I have to tell you guys, I've been in front of this council for over a year now over Algonquin, and the people that are here now weren't there then. Because there's a problem with Algonquin, there's a problem with their expansion, there's a problem with their noise, there's a problem with their emissions, and those of us who live in that area know it firsthand. Those of us who live across the street from it, we're a house of vibrating, know it firsthand. We have to get FERC there. It's one piece of property. They have not sold that property yet to Invenergy, and we need to see. The literature that I get in the mail gives us contact information. Her name is Kimberly Bowles from FERC. We have to write. We can go online. They have open houses. FERC has open houses. We need to participate in it. The open houses that are available now aren't even in Rhode Island. They're in Massachusetts. So we need to get their ear and get their attention. They were just at Crystal Lake just a few months ago. I want to say maybe less than 6 months ago. They were at Crystal Lake, where they had where FERC was there for an open house for us.
Can I just say something? It's really hard for me to just not say anything about FERC. It's really important that you do your research. FERC is a rubber stamp for the power plant companies. Right now, there's a huge campaign going on in DC where they're going to the chairman of FERC's house and letting his neighbors know that all they do is support the power plant companies. So I just don't want you to get your hopes up and think that you're going to get any help from FERC, because the exact opposite thing is true. They're not here for you.
I agree.
Okay, so if you
get an environmental impact statement, that's all we really want.
good luck. And it would be a huge victory if you would be the town that would be able to get them, because they are horrific.
Algonquin had to have environmental impact statement. I was just asking for that to expand it to include Invenergy.
I just don't want you to think that they're going to be your friend. Okay? It's really important.
You're right, they haven't been yet.
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Frank Silva, Burrillville Lake Road. I do have a couple of questions here, and it's to the town council president or the council as a whole. And it's in regards to the siting board. You do send questions to the siting board now? Do you send questions to get answers or anything? Are you allowed to? So we can't get anything like that?
No, we're not interviewing this, so we don't know.
So can you petition them? See, the information line, the pipeline is so slow for us to get the...
John, what did you just say about being interveners? We are interveners. We're asking questions on a regular basis. It's a constant flow of information from our experts and the council itself, some of which you provided, that we're constantly setting up to ask the same questions you're asking now. We set up through.
So you're getting answers coming
We
back?
are getting answers to some. I think we get answers to any
I'm getting the answers from Invenergy, and I'm getting the answers from the site.
Right.
See, what happens, that's what happens. We get an answer from Invenergy on a question we ask. Then our experts look at it, dispute it perhaps, send it back to Invenergy, and now we're in limbo there. And there's 359 questions right now today. So it's not like there's one.
Right, but that's to the Invenergy, the siting board of the short question.
Why is it the siting board?
We don't ask questions to the siting board, they're not answering.
It's part of the process later on. The questioning of the siting board will take place later on when the actual meetings start. They start going forward. As interveners, and questions will be asked. We'll have the ability to answer questions similar to Mrs. Sherman will be able to do the exact same thing.
Yes, so as an intervener, there's going to be a public hearing with the siting board that you can then ask questions and they can answer. Invenergy, but there is public hearing.
So is there a way to petition the siting board now
in regards to, see, our pipeline, our information pipeline is very slow. Okay? We got our second hearing, May 23rd. Exactly. We don't have a lot of information to come to the table to be able to express to the siting board our concerns. We're doing a lot of stuff that we're digging up. With energy, you know, they're very difficult. Their applications vague. You have to kind of like pull things from Mr. Nyland when you run into him. And he's giving you the salesman pitch every time. So it is a big concern. I had mentioned the last informational meeting that we had about maybe contacting the siting board to see if we could get further meetings or extensions. And certainly I mentioned to the siting board the last time I had it, was able to attend, yes. And so my concern is having more time to be able to talk to them, other meetings, and I even mentioned about the hardship for residents of Burrillville, seeing that this plan's going to be here in Burrillville, the hardship to travel out to Jefferson Boulevard for the third and final hearing. And then possibly the limited space. So how many residents that do travel there will be allowed in to the final hearing? So it is concerning. And also, this auditorium, we know it's going to be stacked with labor this coming meeting, May 23rd. Is the town taking any initiative to maybe go into the hockey rink where we could absorb that large crowd if it does show up?
Let's try it. I don't know if it's set up yet.
Okay. All right. And one final thing. I know there's a lot of residents in town, but I think overwhelming, by and large, most of the residents are against this plan. Would the town challenge the ruling if it went against us? You know, I mean, there is a criteria. Mr. Woods, Bob Woods, I think might be holding that booklet that the site board has to follow. And certainly, I think one of the things in there, they're supposed to be looking at brownfields before they take a look at pristine forests such as that. And to me, that's a big concern. Clean water is another big concern. So I mean, there are some things in there that, do we as a town have that capability to challenge the siting boards and result if it goes against us? So I know Mr. Oleg isn't here, but one thing too is I would like to hear something.
I would say we won't know that until we get there. I'll have to find out, but that's like putting the cart in front of the horse in front of the horse. You know? But I would say if the town had recourse, we're gonna take it. Really good.
The question is whether the town will take it, because the town has recourse. If the town loses, the town's an intervener, the town can appeal to the appropriate court of competent jurisdiction. There's absolutely no question about that whatsoever.
He's a faster reader than I was to read for the information that was provided in our packets.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's up to the council. The council needs to make a decision as to whether it is favorably disposed of the plan, or simply that maybe seeks a modification to the plan, or whether the council is unalterably opposed. The council has a right, as an intervener, to enter into a formal proceeding before the energy board, the siting board, in which the town can present expert witnesses. It can cross-examine the witnesses of the applicant. It can cross-examine the witnesses of other interveners. It's a formal proceeding, and that's just what will take place after these informal hearings that the siting board has had. So the town council really needs to make a decision as to whether it is going to take a view in those proceedings that is adverse to the applicant, or whether it's going to, and this has actually nothing on my might say, to do with the treaty. Whether the town is going to be opposed and take a vigorous position in opposition, or the town is going to negotiate. And I'm not talking about negotiating a tax treaty now. I'm talking about negotiating the terms and conditions under which Energy will be allowed to site a plant up on Wall Lake Road. Now, that's a decision that is vested in the town council. The town council has to bring itself to the point of being prepared to make that decision, and it needs to be prepared to make that decision quickly. Now, at some point, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer.
Hold on, I want to hear what he's saying.
I'm sorry?
I want to hear you continue.
Let me, my problem is I'm a little, yeah, let me go to the microphone because unfortunately I'm a little handicapped. What we have in front of us is a very structured legal proceeding. It's a proceeding that's structured by Rhode Island law. And we're faced with a citing board, which, as you very much pointed out, has enormous discretion, with respect to citing and construction. And I emphasize that, citing and construction. They have almost unilateral power. So the question is, from looking at it from a legal standpoint, and a number of people here have pointed that out, whether they are abiding by their own rules, including such things as looking at clean water, including such things as looking at brownfield locations, and so on, in rendering their decision, or whether their decision is going to be what we lawyers would call arbitrary and capricious, in which case one can appeal the decision to a court of law. And since the town is an intervener in these proceedings, the town has the right to appeal if the town makes the determination that the decision by the citing board is arbitrary and capricious. Now, I'm using legal terminology, and I apologize for that, but that's the way we think. What is critical in all of this is that in addition to these informal hearings that all of you have been participating in, and I went to the first one, I thought it was, out of high school, I thought it was a real zoo, to be perfectly honest with you. And I thought it was very poorly managed by the citing board. I didn't understand for the life of me why it was that the applicant sat up on the stage and the citizens of the town of Burrillville sat in the pit when they made their comments. I thought that was an insult. I thought it was just horribly handled. I don't know how the second one went.
Same way.
Probably the same way. And there's no question but that, unfortunately, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, which is in many ways a very fine organization, is being incentivized to make a show of this. They're the last people who should, because ultimately they're going to be hurt by it, and they're going to be hurt by it badly, but that's the way it is. Now, what this town has to do, if it's seriously opposed to the power plant, is through its town council, vigorously oppose, through its town council, the siting and construction of this plant. And with luck, and I understand the argument that the cards are stacked against you, with luck will be successful. I think there is already, my sense is, there is a change of atmosphere that's going on at the moment with respect to whether this is a desirable project or not. From a political standpoint, there's a change of atmosphere. We have two state representatives who have now become strongly opposed to it. I think that's very important. And I should also mention, incidentally, my name is Barry Craig. I'm a new guy on the block.
Could you say your name again, sir? I'm sorry, I didn't hear your name.
Craig, C-R-A-I-G. For those of you who know a little bit about the history of my family goes back over 100 years in Burrillville. Helen Maroney, who many of you knew, very active in the community, is my aunt, and was my aunt, and also my godmother. I'm the eldest of her nephews and nieces. And when she passed away last year, we found ourselves running Echo Lake Campground, and now I'm a resident of Burrillville. But I was here as a kid, you know. I can remember the family home was up on Sales Avenue, at the very end of Sales Avenue, and there's a big oak tree out in front of the house, and it's still there. And I remember as a 3 or 4-year-old being tied to that oak tree. My mother telling me, go out and get your pink cheeks, you know. So, but in any event, that's what needs to happen. And it's extremely important, I think, that the people who are opposed to it, despite the fact that it is a pretty ugly situation, that you show up at these public hearings that that are being held by the siting board, because size matters, emails matter, telephone calls matter to the appropriate public officials. They do ultimately listen to those things. Now, I came here originally not to argue with you, but because I saw, I read the opinions of counsel that our town solicitor has offered to the board, and those are the ones that are published in the agenda. And my personal opinion, and I have to emphasize, I'm not a lawyer licensed to practice law in Rhode Island. I'm licensed to practice law in the District of Columbia, of all places, Washington. But at best, I read these responses as being timid. At worst, I read these responses as being responses that discourage action rather than encourage. He responds to the question, can the town council find new solutions to prevent locating the power plant in Burrillville? Well, the answer is to go back and say the facilities siting board has all this power. That's not the answer. The answer is whether we can find creative ways of dealing with this issue, whether it's talking to other agencies, whether it's the possibility, and I don't even know if it's possible, you might know, is a petition to intervene in the DEM proceedings possible? Is it possible to stimulate DEM to have hearings as well as the siting board? Anything that delays this project makes it less likely. That's the plain fact of the matter is, companies like this work on a time schedule. If they can't get a project done within a particular time frame, they move on to the next project. They don't waste a lot of time. So anything that delays the process is something that works ultimately in the favor of the town if your attitude is that you're trying to avoid having the project built here in Burrillville. Can the zoning board refuse to grant variances? This raises, I think, a very interesting question about the legislation, and I'm on very dangerous ground here because I'm not a Rhode Island lawyer. But when I read the statute, what the statute says is that the siting board has virtually complete discretion to determine the site of a power plant. It has complete discretion in determining how that plant is going to be constructed. And it has no jurisdiction with respect to the way in which that plant is operated. So, for example, I have been wondering why there is so much concern about whether the facilities board is going to veto the town's regulations with respect to noise. I don't think they've got the power to do it. Now, I'm not a Rhode Island lawyer, I may be wrong, but to me, noise is an operational matter. It's a health and safety matter. It is not a matter that deals with siting. It is not a matter that deals with construction. Wildlife. Wildlife is an operational matter. The sustainability of wildlife is an operational matter. It is not a matter of siting a power plant. It is not a matter of building a power plant. And to my view anyway, anyone who builds a power plant in the town of Burrillville or anywhere else in Rhode Island has to comply with local ordinances when it comes to such matters as health and safety, when it comes to such matters as traffic. Traffic might be a little closer call when it comes to traffic that's generated by construction. But normal increases in traffic that are caused by operations, I think the town council has the right to regulate that.
I'm going to interrupt you because I've got the statute in front of me, okay? It's 42-98-7, and it talks about the powers and duties of the siting board.
Right.
And respectfully, it does specifically say that any agency, board, council, or commission of the state or political subdivision of the state, which absent this chapter would be required to issue a permit, license, assent, or variance in order for the siting, construction, or alteration of a major energy facility to proceed, shall sit and function at the direction of the siting board.
And you notice...
I just want to finish reading it. The agency shall follow the procedures established by statute, ordinance, and/or regulation providing for determining the permit, license, assent, or variance. But instead of issuing that permit, license, assent, or variance, it shall forward its findings from the proceedings together just with the records supporting the finding and recommendation for final action to the siting board. And that's consistent with the information that our attorneys have been giving us, that the advisory opinions from the zoning board and from the planning board in terms of whether or not the project complies with the comprehensive plan, the noise, the other ordinances relating to whether it be permissible under our town standards. That's all included in the advisory opinion. And while normally our planning department or our zoning board would make those determinations under this statute, they're limited to giving their advisory opinions on whether it complies with our regulations, our ordinances, our comprehensive plan. Their advisory opinion gets forwarded to the siting board, and then our attorney would have an opportunity to present that, question their witnesses, and then the siting board ultimately has the power. So I just don't want you to, we can't give the public information that's not accurate either. I mean, if
No, but I agree with you.
Okay.
I agree with everything that you've said so far. Notice that the word operations is not there. And I can point to you in one place in the statute, which is a broad intent provision, which uses the word operations. It is nowhere else. So the word operations has been intentionally deleted. Moreover, if you take a look at the section of the statute that deals with violations, the violations that that might occur after the construction of the power plant, the Energy Board has no power. In fact, I can't tell that anyone has any power.
Did you look under their rules of procedure? Because I thought it specifically said under they have a section of the statute that delegates the authority to the siting board. They have their own rules of procedure. And I thought I read in there that they have the enforcement authority to revoke the permit that
Only during siting and construction. That's the first section.
I'm going to actually ask Louise to have that question specifically. He's saying, and if I'm mischaracterizing what you're saying, please let me know. If the siting board issues the permit for this project, okay, and Energy somehow violates the conditions of that permit, does the siting board have the authority to revoke the permit?
After it's built?
After it's built.
Well, that was his scenario that he's raising.
Yeah, I mean, that's the scenario we're talking about, is after it's built. After it's built, and it's in operation. And to carry that question further, does the town have the right to enforce its noise ordinance against the plant once the plant is in operation?
I think she's got it.
I would suggest to you that there's nothing in the statute that gives them that authority. And the language you just read I can cite you to,
We're going to refer those questions specifically to the attorney so that they can be more comprehensive and thorough answers to the questions you just raised.
the preliminary section of the statute, which I believe is 4298-1. I'm not sure I have it in front of me. Does specifically mention the term operations. It is specific where the powers and duties are described, which is in the section you read, I believe, which is 4288-7. Yeah, there is no mention of operations, none. None. And 4298-16, sorry about this.
I can assure you that Kirk got that question perfectly right, so.
Now, as far as the zoning board is concerned, firstly, as I think you just pointed out, you just read, the applicant is supposed to file with the zoning board request for any variances which are required under our zoning ordinances. Has it done that?
During the process.
It's clearly required.
Is Tom still here? Tom, are you here? I saw earlier. Did we leave? Okay.
But they haven't filed yet. They were going to file until after they went through the planning board.
Now, if we're talking about an energy facilities authority, I'm sorry, siting board, that has to make a decision by September.
No. They don't have to make a decision by September. The advisory opinions are due September 9th.
All right, the advisory opinions are good.
Yeah.
And when was their preliminary order issued? Sometime in March?
Yes.
Yeah, sometime in March. So we've gone March, April, May, at least, without their doing a damn thing and presenting anything to the zoning board. Am I right about that?
Planning.
I'm sorry?
They're going through planning first.
Have they applied to planning at this point? No, okay. So here's my point. It's unreasonable to expect that a zoning board or a planning board is going to be able to react in an intelligent manner and provide an advisory opinion on a matter in which they're not even an application at this point.
Our planning department is already reviewing their application, okay?
Well, the language.
But that process is going to continue to evolve. They've started now. They have.
It's possible there is a possibility.
What was that?
I said there is a possibility that they're not following the proper procedure too.
Here's my point is this, that
They've submitted a preliminary. There's so many legal definitions when it comes to planning. I'm not the lawyer up here. They've submitted one part of a plan to the planning department and the planning board. We got the chance to hear the planning board talk about it at the first meeting, then there was another one at the high school where Infra Energy came before the planning board. They did their process.
They didn't have much information.
And that's the question at hand. The question at hand is what type of application is being put in? It's all legal. It's all one big process.
David, with all due respect, when we talk about an environmental impact statement, now, and I don't know how many people have read the environmental impact statement from cover to cover for Ocean State Power. It's 588 pages. Before I read it, I looked to see if there was a video or something. There wasn't. Before I read it, believe me, it is thorough. It's very comprehensive. Okay, and that, if I was sitting on a zoning board or a planning board and had to make an opinion on that plan, if I'm in the neighborhood and I want to have my opinion on that plan, I want something like that to tell me what they're putting into the air. I want something like that to tell me what's going on, what's going to happen with the water. I want to know what impact that has on my life and my family and my property. And they do not have that yet. So if you want me to make a decision on that as a zoning board or a planning board member, they need to have an environmental impact statement. They need, the plans that I looked at for that plan, I submit better housing plans than that.
So how do you think our planning board will react to the plans? You've had experience with them. How do you think they're going to react to that?
Well, I'm going to be there and see that
On June
firsthand.
6th, that's what they're going to do. You recall all this on.
Now, one thing they could do is approve it. Yeah, one thing they could do is approve it. And then everything that I've said is sort of irrelevant.
Disapprove it, sir.
Pardon?
They could also disapprove it.
And they can
also
disapprove.
continue it if they don't have the information.
Now, and they can disapprove it, but my thought would be this, that it would be a mistake to either approve or disapprove without having a reasonable time period in which to consider the plan. When you argue about what a reasonable time.
You're making an assumption during a timeline. If they don't have the questions answered, they've submitted numerous questions, and up to the last Thursday, they didn't receive those answers yet. How can they make a decision?
They can't.
They won't.
And they won't.
And
they won't. And their advisory opinion will be, if they give an advisory opinion, that we were not given an opportunity to consider the application. And you will list the reasons why. And at that point, the siting board ought to dismiss the
The
application.
planning board would not be irresponsible in their function.
That's my point. That's exactly my point. And if people are not given a reasonable period of time to perform their statutory duties, then what is happening is that the applicant is frustrating the ability of the siting board to perform its responsibilities under the statute, and the siting board ought to dismiss the application.
In my view, if they continue with the process without the planning board's proper input to them, doesn't that put us in a better position to challenge the decision?
No, I don't think so. I think you need to give the siting. I think that the siting board, there needs to be a presentation to the siting board that says that a proper advisory opinion cannot be rendered because the applicant did not answer the questions that the applicant was asked to address. And therefore, the applicant has not complied with the statute. The rules of the siting board require them to apply. So what I'm saying is, those are grounds to dismiss the application on the siting board's standpoint. If the siting board doesn't do it, then it is grounds for a proper appeal.
I'd like to know, I honestly want to know, are you trying to provide us with an opinion on how to go about this process? That's...
As a non-lawyer, I am.
I would ask that you go to the next siting board meeting and put your name down and bring all that up to them, because that would be very valuable.
Well, listen, no, but it's partially your responsibility.
I understand that, and we'll get to that point.
You're out here with the mic either, so.
Yep.
And I've already been in contact with Bianco, and I've already told him I want to speak at the next session, which is the May 23rd session, and I tend to make these same points there.
Okay.
And since you put it in writing, you only have 5 minutes. Document in writing and send it to us.
Correct. I'd like to try and wrap this up. Is there anything else that
I'm finished, so.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate your
I just have 2 final questions. Number 1, is the town council willing to accept the opinions or documents from other towns? If you remember back when Smithfield was going to get a power plant, Mr. Lees most eloquently gave Burrillville's opinion that they were against it. And And I think that something like that holds a lot of weight. So my question is, would you be willing to accept North Smithfield or Douglas or Blackstone or Upshur? Would you be willing to accept their opinion on the power plant and be able to put it in as an intervener as you like? Are you interested? In other words,
Well,
are you interested in the
Ray, I would definitely be interested in the town's opinions. The truth be told, I'm getting letters from all over Townsend and Killingly and Putnam. Well, certainly we would, but I'd have to find out if we can use that. If we can use it, then it's more ammo for the gun, for sure. I'd be willing to do it.
And the second one is, would you be willing to solicit?
Solicit the other towns?
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you what, again, I mentioned it earlier, I had a meeting with Paul Roselli, the Borough Land Trust, and he is in the process of having meetings in Thompson, in Killingly, in Putnam, in Smithfield, in North Smithfield, in Gloucester, and Forster. He's doing that for us.
Well, yeah, the problem with that, of course, is that we don't have the standing that you have.
I
So we
understand
can do
that,
the
but
legwork, but the standing that the town council of Burrillville has is so much more than any of us have.
I understand that, but Mr. Roselli also has his energy involved in those conversations. Something that I may not be able to pull off, obviously.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ray.
I just want to follow up with what Robin says.
Sure.
Getting in touch with the reps and the senator, the governor, the people of DEM, and I think if you fill their email boxes with some correspondence, and if there's somebody that's good with the computer, if they can come up with a form letter and let people click on it, and then simply fill in the blank of, this is our statement from the residents of the town of Burrillville, and click that and send that. And just one example, I work in a small hospital in Putnam, Connecticut, and there were budget cuts from the state level that would seriously affect healthcare to the poor and uninsured. And 1,500 employees from Dave Kimball sent letters to their legislators, their governors, their families sent letters, their friends sent letters, the patients sent letters, and they filled the email boxes of the people, and a portion of the funding was refunded back to the hospitals. So I think you got to fill up the email boxes of people above, with all due respect, above the town council, because I don't think you have the power that we need, and it's got to go up, it's got to go to Keble, it's got to go to Fogey, Newberry, it's got to go to everybody in the area, and the governor, and the DEM.
In this letters, sample letter on the Conservation Law Foundation website, the Conservation Law Foundation does that sample letter to send to political figures.
Because it helps.
It helps.
Thank you, Carol.
John, real quick, I have a couple points I want to talk about, but one, I didn't quite get. Did you answer Ray's question? Will the town solicit opinions from neighboring towns? I know Paul is doing a great job. He's out there, educating, but we're asking, as a town, will you solicit some opinions from the other
I don't know
towns?
that we have, John.
No, I'm saying,
As part of the
can
planning
we?
process, as part of the
Planning process, the
application
planning-
is submitted, we automatically notify other communities that this is going on.
And we'll get their
Requesting
opinions.
their information.
Well, the planning board will get their opinions.
Okay, so we
It
do,
is happening, not from the council, but it's happening from the town. The town is soliciting opinions. The planning board.
thank you. A couple of things, as this town, as we're being educating on this process, you still talk to some people who, they're pretty simple-minded, and I don't fault them for that, but they think, well, I don't see this power plant, I don't think it's a big deal. And one of the things that I'd like to drive home, and I'd really like to express and show the people that are at these meetings, and some new people have been coming all the time, is the actual noise and the different frequencies. We have these experts. It would be great if we could get, a sound frequency generator up and let them know and show what some of these sound levels are actually going to sound like. If anyone's familiar with how frequencies work, higher level frequencies are much easier to mute or to block than lower frequencies. That's why submarines use very low frequencies for communication, because you essentially can't stop those frequencies. So some of the lower table that we already hear today, there is most likely no way to ever block those noise frequencies, which is why you see Invenergy say, yeah, we believe we can meet the A-weighted decibel range. Don't be fooled by that, because that A-weighted, it's essentially taking some sort of a logarithmic average of all the different frequency noises, okay? And I'm pretty sure they flat out said there's no way we're ever going to meet some of those lower frequencies. And they're very slick with their answers. They say, oh, it's okay, but you're not going to hear them. Well, they're partially correct, you know, and I'm not a sound expert, and we do have some in town that I'm working on getting at one of the next meetings. But when you hear a helicopter go by, you hear thump, 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 thump. You're not actually necessarily hearing that noise. What it is there are actually those frequencies, your brain is putting that together, and you think you're hearing a noise, but it's not really there. So again, you know, Mr. Lyland, as we like to call him now, you know, that's more of a half-truth. So there's a lot of things that I really love these residents to hear, because, again, some of the people that don't understand, they say, well, they're going to make the A-weighted. I almost don't care about the A-weighted. I want to know each and every frequency, how you're going to hear it, and what's that going to sound like to us. Two, while we're on the topic of experts, and we talked about this before, but I don't really recall, the experts that we hired, who actually sought them out and found them? Was it the town council, town solicitor, town manager?
It was the town manager and the town solicitor brought recommendations to the town council.
Okay, so you guys understand? Yes.
I don't think you got a full answer on that. When we hired an expert to help us with the litigation involving Ocean State Power, we've been working with an expert that knows power companies, and we had worked with him for a long time because we were in litigation with Ocean State Power for 6 years, okay?
Are you talking about a legal expert or one of the other experts? You know,
He's an expert in power companies, and he helped us with, like, you know, trying to assess a value for what we should be taxing the power plant at. However, because he's in such a specialized area, I think he was also instrumental in terms of trying to give us a list, or give the administration a list of individuals that could be experts in their particular areas. And they're not local people. I mean, we sought people out from...
No, I understand that.
Okay, so
I get that. Yeah, thank you.
And they have, you know, one of our concerns in terms of finding, you know, any expert in this type of situation, especially like, you know, being involved with the Ocean State Power, is you want to have somebody who's not going to be involved with that company, because these companies have companies all over the country. So one of the biggest concerns that we had when we were talking about hiring an expert is trying to make sure there's somebody who is not going to have any familiarity or have any other, you know, ties to this particular event energy company. And that was a difficult, that was difficult when we were addressing the Ocean State Power litigation, because I recall at one point when we were in court, because I was present during some of the, we were basically in mediation before the Supreme Court, and the judge had wanted us to try to, instead of having the judge mediate that litigation, he wanted us to try to find an expert to sort of oversee as the arbitrator, and we were absolutely not willing to do that because we didn't feel that we could find somebody that wasn't somehow involved with these power companies, and we didn't feel that we were going to get a fair shake during that process, and we actually declined that. And the judge was pretty upset with us for doing that. Ultimately, we were, I mean, he was upset. He said, fine, take your shot at a trial, but you might not like what you're going to say. And it was tough, it was stressful, but luckily we were able to resolve that. So, you know, in terms of your concerns and in terms of, you know, the experts that we found, how we found them, who they are, they're all legitimate questions. They're all concerns that I had as well. You know, we want to make the right choices here, and there was a lot of thought put into that.
Okay, I'm sure there was a lot of thought put into it. So then, let's assume, just for the sake of argument here, I'm not necessarily agreeing that these are the best experts to hire. But right now, it seems like they're under the direction of, primarily from Mr. Wood and probably Attorney Oleg, perhaps Attorney McElroy too. We, as a town, have a huge problem with that. Yes. It's very clear in the Bugle that recently came out that Mike Woods is in favor for this. I wish he was here because I'd love to address him directly, but you know what? So be it. I'll address him some other time if you want. wants to. It's very clear that he wants this power plant, you know, and for some reason he has an unhealthy obsession with bringing this to town. I don't know, does he have a house waiting for him in Montana? I don't know if this comes to town, but it's not healthy. I would appreciate and I would ask that the town council limits his role and his involvement. I'll just finish off, limits his role, because as a town council, you know, he answers to you. For some reason, you know, and it appears that for years, the town council has been, you know, answering to him, and we know it's it's by statute supposed to be the other way around. So I would really like to take anything dealing with directing our experts and anything dealing with energy. I want the council to weigh in on that. I want him to be directed that you're not to speak with Inventor, you're not to even speak with our experts, and let you clear with, it doesn't have to be the whole town council, maybe you elect a liaison, okay? A liaison. And here's why. It was very clear to me from the expert testimony that we heard, and I use that term loosely, expert, that they were, I guess the term is, they were pussyfooting around the answers, and they were being very timid, as the retired attorney here pointed out. They're being very timid with their answers, and the only reason I could think that they're doing that is because they're being directed to do so, okay?
Yes.
And you know, I think I want to end it there. I think I've made my point. I could drive this point home for another hour, but I think you get my point, and I respectfully ask that you do that. Don't think about it, do it.
Okay, thank you, John.
You've read pages 6, 7, 8, 9 of the Bugle, right?
I have to be honest, I haven't. I only read one.
Okay, well, you should read it.
I will, because this is the second time
I didn't know that Mike Wood had a law degree or a medical degree when he says not to be overly concerned with the Ocean State Power Plant.
Okay.
And other things too. You gotta read those 4 pages.
You'll read it and you're gonna agree with me 100%.
Horrible.
Tell him to shut his mouth and not talk to anyone outside.
This is horrible.
Okay, we're gonna wrap this up now. Yeah.
Ask for consideration. And I'm gonna bring it right back down to the tax treaty. When you talk about the tax treaty, at least for me, you implied that you'd be talking about possible buyouts for neighborhoods. Is that correct?
I really haven't seen it to discuss it. A part of it, I believe, is a property tax agreement template that the abutters can use. But I don't have those answers
Why
at
I
the
say that
time.
is I know what happened with Ocean State Power. When it comes time to talk about our properties, would you consider having a couple of us on your board for that negotiation to represent us?
Let me find out if we can.
Consider that.
Let me find out if we can.
Hasn't that question already been asked?
Yes, I asked that.
Yes.
Well, I asked.
I know that.
Well, I've asked.
It was still,
Before we had to hire our attorneys to be interveners, we asked for a voice. Just to set the
I know,
record.
I was in Mr. Bowman's house when it happened, I know.
Yes, we did.
You know, so, we're gonna wrap this.
We had to hire attorneys.
Okay, all right, real quick, I see you jumping up now, what's up? I'm sorry.
I'm trying to be respectful. What I have to say may not be the most respectful, however. We know that you volunteer, we know how much time that you put in. Besides this, just power plant, we know how much time. Beyond that, we know how much time you put in, and that you're our citizens, and you're our neighbors, and you're our friends, and we go to cookouts with you. However, you are not paid. And Mr. Wood is. So if this tax treaty comes in and our town comes in, who is to say he's not going to ask for a raise because he's gotten money?
Yep.
So he's negotiating,
Yes.
but he's the only one financially. I know you're going to say he's not going to get a raise.
No, I wasn't gonna say that. By town charter, the town manager's employment contract comes up every 2 years for review. That's gonna be done this February.
Well, I'm just saying, it's because.
With whoever's on the council at that time will do that.
And the two people who are negotiating for us are the two. You are our citizens, so it would be nice for a citizen.
They get paid $6,000 a year.
Well, okay, so 6,000. And 6,000 for what they do, okay? So I appreciate it, and 6,000 is not, I'm not thinking that they're going to come back and say, well, we got a power plant, we're now have 18,000.
We're not gonna do that. If anybody's interested, come on. Sure.
And Ken Putnam
You
Jr.,
got it.
my great-grandfather lived in this house, it's under 1,800 years old. My father lived in the house 98 years, the same house, born in the same house, and I was born in the same house. They had 7 children, and this is what I want to leave you with. My family is still here in Burrillville. They're all thinking of moving. This is pollution, deadly stuff that we're talking about. You guys should be so calm down.
Yes.
Mad up there.
Yes.
I don't want my family to move. I want my family just where it is.
Yes.
And you guys should want the same damn thing.
Yes.
We do.
To fight for us.
Yes.
Do everything you can. Think about it all day. We can't sleep at night. We can't watch a TV program
Amen.
without talking about it.
That's right.
It's our life.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all for coming out tonight.
Can you just clarify for everyone here who exactly the individuals, and please name them, who is negotiating with the manager? The tax agreement.
Right now, it's the council instructs the solicitor, who is our assistant solicitor concerning this is Mr. McElroy, who dealt with Ocean State Power. So that's who's negotiating, but based on the recommendations of the council.
So it's just Invenergy and McElroy?
Correct.
Like,
No.
and Oleg are not involved?
Oleg is not involved in that. And it's
Okay.
not just, to clarify, it's not just the attorneys, okay?
It's also the experts from both sides, because both the power company and the town have our own positions in terms of what the value of this should be. So it's not just the attorneys, it's the expert that was hired to do that, and he's the same one that I was referring to that assisted us with the Ocean State
And
Power.
who is that? I'm sorry.
What is that? No, I'm sorry, I should know that, but yes, Susan. I'm sorry.
So why is our finance director and our tax assessor not involved in negotiations? Okay, but I believe if I read correctly, our tax assessor will be giving an advisory opinion regarding the effect on property values. Is she versed, I no disrespect to Ms. Nagar, is she versed, is she well informed to be able to weigh in on that?
She should be, and the experts are helping her to do that.
So we have a real estate expert in tandem with our tax assessor.
We will.
Do we know, we will or we do?
We do.
And who is our real estate?
The tax assessors department has, I think, 3 questions they have to answer. And that's it. That's the 3 questions they got to answer.
Who's the real estate expert?
I have to find out for you, because again, these guys negotiate with Invenergy and then they come back to us. It's not like we're sitting in a room with them.
So is it in our best interest to have a counselor sitting in the room during those negotiations?
I wouldn't think so at this time, because the council as a whole will have to approve it or disapprove it. So the council as a whole, here's what they have to say. It's probably better that way, as opposed to just one of us hearing the whole story.
John, can I just...
I do, I
No,
absolutely.
because what I'm saying is, you have people negotiating a tax treaty who want the power plant. Do you understand
Yes.
that? That's why we're so...
Yes.
It's so wrong.
Can I just respond to that? You have your question about a council person in the negotiation, if I could, is it okay?
No, it wasn't.
That's a good question, but one of the things that I would say, and no disrespect to any member of the council, I don't want any one of them in there, because when they go to vote on that ordinance, one of them, whoever it is, will have been part of that, and not that I don't trust they think as individuals, and I believe this council does, but there's always going to be the potential for suspicion of, well, that person negotiated that, so we've got to stand behind that person. You're always better off having separation between the voting body on that ordinance, and so you don't want someone who's negotiated that ordinance to also be voting on it.
That's the same person who should have the signing board.
I understand that, but I'm just saying, again, I'm just trying to be objective. I would never have wanted, in the situation, if I was on the admin side, you don't, and even as a member of the public, I do not want a council person who's negotiated now casting a vote, because we know that person's vote is going to be yes, if he negotiated it or she negotiated it. So I just...
Recuse themselves anyway?
And now, do you want your council person to recuse on that ordinance, or do you want more voices of your council? From experience, I just think it's risky to have them in the room. I really want their objectivity on that final ordinance, when we as a public have say on it too, at that.
Okay. Robin, I can't thank you enough for being here tonight. I hope we learned a little bit anyway. 2 weeks from now, we'll be at Springway Beach at Champlain Hall. I've been told that we'll have an expert available at that time. Tomorrow night, we have our first meeting of the municipal budget in the town council chambers. If anybody's interested, we'd be happy to see you at 7 o'clock. And we have a normal meeting of the regular town council next Wednesday in council chambers at this time. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it.